Ethan's scientific mind raced as he examined the unconscious creature. Its fur, while appearing similar to an earth leopard's at first glance, felt different under his fingertips, almost like fine silk interwoven with microscopic filaments that seemed to respond to his touch. The spots weren't just iridescent. They appeared to shift and swirl with colors that shouldn't exist in nature, patterns that momentarily hurt his eyes when he tried to focus on them too long. "This isn't possible," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the crashing waves. His training as a marine biologist had prepared him for discovering new species, but nothing like this. Pushing aside his shock, Ethan's medical training took over. He placed his fingers against what he hoped was the creature's neck, searching for a pulse. Instead of a steady rhythm, he felt an unusual vibration, almost like a quiet humming. The breathing slits along its ribcage expanded and contracted in an alternating pattern, suggesting a respiratory system unlike anything on Earth. Ethan glanced around the deserted beach, suddenly aware of his isolation. His research station was miles from the nearest town, chosen specifically for its remoteness to study endangered marine ecosystems without human interference. Now that isolation felt different, both a blessing and a curse. "I need to get you somewhere safe," he said to the unconscious being, unsure if it could hear him. The creature was heavy, easily the weight of a large adult male leopard, but Ethan managed to hoist it carefully onto his shoulders in a firefighter's carry. The trek back to his research cabin was arduous. Every few minutes, Ethan had to stop and check on his unusual patient. The creature remained unconscious, but the pulsing of its spots had stabilized into a steady rhythm that Ethan hoped was a good sign. As he approached his cabin, the sun broke through the morning mist, illuminating the strange being on his shoulders. In the clear light, Ethan noticed more details: a metallic collar-like device around its neck, partially hidden by fur, and what appeared to be thin, translucent membranes between its additional limbs. His cabin, a modest structure equipped with basic research equipment, suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. What did one do with an alien? Should he contact authorities? The scientific community? Ethan's mind filled with images of government quarantines, endless interrogations, and his discovery being locked away in some classified facility. "No," he decided aloud. "You're my responsibility now. At least until I understand what's happening." Inside, Ethan cleared his examination table, normally used for marine specimens, and gently placed the creature on it. He gathered his first aid kit, a thermal blanket, and various monitoring equipment, though he doubted his human-calibrated devices would be much use. As he arranged his supplies, Ethan caught his reflection in his cabin window. Face flushed with exertion, hair wild from the ocean, and the difficult trek, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. In that moment, he realized that regardless of what happened next, his life would never be the same. The creature's breathing suddenly changed pattern, becoming deeper and more regular. One of its 6 limbs, a foreleg, twitched slightly. Ethan stepped back, heart pounding, as he realized his unusual patient might be regaining consciousness. "Please be friendly," he whispered, reaching for his satellite phone, but not quite picking it up. "Please be friendly." The creature's 3 eyes focused on Ethan with unnerving precision, tracking his every movement. The galaxy-like irises contracted and expanded, seemingly adjusting to the cabin's dim light. Ethan remained frozen in place, his scientific curiosity battling with primal fear. "You need not be afraid," the voice in his mind continued, feminine yet resonant with unfamiliar harmonics. "Your actions have earned my trust." Ethan swallowed hard. You can speak English." A sound emerged from the creature that might have been laughter. "I am not speaking your language. The translator medallion interprets my thoughts directly into your mind, using patterns from your own neural activity." Lyra Vex shifted into a more comfortable position, moving with liquid grace despite her recent trauma. The 6 limbs arranged themselves in a balanced posture that reminded Ethan of a sphinx. "Your species is full of contradictions," she continued, her head tilting in apparent curiosity. "Our data indicates humans typically fear the unknown, yet you risk your life to save me without hesitation." Ethan found his voice again. "It's called compassion. I couldn't just watch you drown." Compassion. The alien seemed to taste the word. "We have observed this trait in humans, but rarely directed toward unknown entities that offer no clear benefit." Her spots pulsed with a soft blue light. Intriguing. Ethan pulled up his desk chair and sat down, partly because his legs felt unsteady and partly to appear less threatening. "You said you're an observer. You've been studying us." Lyra Vex's tail swished in what might have been affirmation. "For 7 of your Earth years, I have monitored this region's human-wildlife interactions. My findings contribute to the Alliance's comprehensive assessment of your species." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Assessment for what purpose? The alien spots shifted to a cooler purple. "All developing worlds are evaluated before potential contact. The cosmos has rules, Dr. Reeves." "I never told you my name," Ethan said, tensing slightly. "Your identification was in your dwelling," Lyra Vex explained. "Additionally, your research publications on marine ecosystem protection are quite thorough. I have studied them." Ethan blinked in surprise. "You've read my work." "Your dedication to preserving oceanic biodiversity aligns with Alliance principles," she replied, "though your species' broader actions often contradict such efforts." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the cabin windows. Rain began to fall, pattering against the roof. The sudden storm seemed to concern Lyra Vex, who glanced upward. "My vessel's emergency protocols will have activated upon submersion," she explained. "The recovery beacon is waterproof but not designed for prolonged exposure to your planet's salinity levels." "Your spaceship is underwater?" Ethan asked, the reality of the situation hitting him anew. Lyra Vex's spots flickered with what might have been concern. "My observation craft rests approximately 2 kilometers offshore at a depth of 53 meters. It contains essential data and technology that must not fall into human hands." She fixed her trinocular gaze on Ethan. "I require your assistance, human savior." Ethan ran his fingers through his still damp hair. He was a decent diver, but 53 meters was pushing his limits. Yet the alternative, allowing others to discover alien technology, seemed far more dangerous. "I'll help you," he decided, surprising himself with his lack of hesitation. "But I have conditions. I want answers. Real ones." Lyra Vex's spots brightened to a warm golden hue. "Understandable. It appears we have much to discuss, Ethan Reeves, before my people arrive." Ethan paced the length of his cabin, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. Outside, the rain had intensified, thrumming against the roof like impatient fingers. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Your people have been watching Earth for centuries, and now we're basically on cosmic probation." Lyra Vex's tail curled around her haunches as she sat on the examination table. "The Alliance has observed thousands of developing worlds, species that achieve technological advancement without corresponding ethical evolution, often self-destruct or become threats to neighboring systems." "And which category have you placed us in?" Ethan asked, already dreading the answer. "Your nuclear weapons capabilities alone would typically warrant quarantine," she explained, her spots shifting to a somber gray. "Factor in accelerating climate destabilization, biodiversity collapse, and resource depletion patterns." Ethan stopped pacing. "But those are problems we're working to solve. Many of us are fighting to change things." "Indeed," Lyra Vex acknowledged, "which is why Earth remains under evaluation, rather than already designated for isolation protocols. The Alliance recognizes the diversity of human perspectives." She rose gracefully and approached Ethan's research table where marine conservation maps were spread out. With a delicate 6-fingered paw, she indicated the protected areas Ethan had been instrumental in establishing. "Your work exemplifies the paradox. One human creating protection zones, while others destroy similar ecosystems elsewhere. Her three eyes blinked in sequence. The Cosmic Evaluation Committee values data patterns, trends, probabilities. Individual exceptions rarely influence final classifications. Ethan slumped into his chair. So my saving you is statistically insignificant, Lyra Vex confirmed, yet profoundly important to me personally. Her spots briefly flashed a warm pink before returning to their neutral blue. I find myself in an unusual position. My final report will heavily influence the committee's decision. Thunder cracked overhead, making the lights flicker. In that momentary darkness, Lyra Vex's spots illuminated the room with an ethereal glow. What would change their minds? Ethan asked. What do they need to see? Lyra Vex considered this. The committee seeks evidence that a species can transcend its evolutionary programming, that it can choose collective well-being over individual advantage, that it values life beyond its own kind. But humans do that all the time. Ethan protested. We have entire organizations dedicated to protecting endangered species, preserving ecosystems, helping strangers across cultural boundaries. Exceptional individuals exist in all species, Lyra Vex agreed. The question is whether such behaviors can become dominant patterns rather than outliers. She moved to the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. My near-death experience has complicated my assessment. You risk your life for an unknown entity. This suggests capacity for universal compassion that our models hadn't predicted. Ethan joined her at the window. One data point isn't enough, is it? No, she admitted, but it has created doubt where before there was certainty. Her spots pulsed thoughtfully. My people value empirical evidence. Perhaps together we can provide more compelling data before they arrive. Hope flickered in Ethan's chest. How long do we have? Approximately 68 of your hours, Lyra Vex replied. Time enough to attempt retrieval of my vessel's data cores, which contain my previous observations. Time enough, perhaps, to amend my final report. Ethan nodded, determination replacing his initial shock. Then we'd better get started. The late afternoon sun broke through the clouds as Ethan rummaged through his collection of digital media. His laptop whirred as he pulled up files showcasing humanity's achievements. Lyra Vex watched with rapt attention, her three eyes never blinking in unison. This is the International Space Station, Ethan explained, showing footage of astronauts from different countries working together. Scientists from nations that were once enemies now collaborate in orbit. Lyra Vex's spots pulsed with interest. Cooperation despite historical territorial conflicts. Noteworthy. Ethan nodded eagerly. And this is from the Great Barrier Reef Restoration Project. These divers are transplanting lab-grown coral to replace what was lost to bleaching events. The alien leaned closer to the screen, her head tilting. You attempt to reverse ecological damage rather than simply adapting to it. Some of us do, Ethan admitted. Not everyone, not yet, but more every year. He continued his impromptu presentation, showing footage of humanitarian aid efforts, renewable energy projects, and international conservation treaties. With each example, he found himself growing more passionate, more convinced of humanity's potential. Your species contains multitudes, Lyra Vex observed. It is difficult to categorize. Ethan laughed. That's kind of our thing. We're messy, contradictory, and inconsistent, but we're capable of growth. The alien's medallion glowed as she processed this information. In the Alliance, species tend toward unified cultural development. Your diversity is unusual. Is that bad? Ethan asked, suddenly concerned. It is neither good nor bad. It is simply unfamiliar to our models. Her spots shifted to a contemplative purple. Perhaps our evaluation metrics require adjustment for species with your particular evolutionary path. Ethan took this as a small victory. He switched to his music library, remembering Lyra Vex's earlier interest. Music might help you understand us better than data ever could. He selected Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, and the rich tones filled the cabin. Lyra Vex went completely still, her spots pulsing in rhythm with the music. When the piece ended, she remained motionless for several seconds. "This creates sensations I cannot translate," she finally said. "The mathematical patterns intertwine with emotional resonances in a way that is." Her spots flashed with brilliant colors. Profound. Encouraged, Ethan played Nina Simone's "Feeling Good." Lyra Vex's reaction was even more dramatic. Her entire body swayed slightly, and her spots created complex, swirling patterns. "This female's vocalizations contain truth beyond the words," she whispered. "How is this possible?" "That's the magic of being human," Ethan said softly. "We communicate in layers: words, tone, music, art. Sometimes what we don't say is as important as what we do." As evening approached, they moved to the small porch of the cabin. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and the sunset spectacular. Lyra Vex seemed fascinated by the changing colors of the sky. "Tomorrow we must retrieve my vessel's data cores," she reminded him. "The waters will be dangerous after the storm." Ethan nodded, watching the horizon. "I've arranged to borrow better diving equipment from a colleague's boat. We'll head out at dawn." Lyra Vex's spots dimmed as darkness fell. "You understand that regardless of my personal opinion, the Alliance will make their own assessment when they arrive." "I know," Ethan replied. "But I have to try. Not just for humanity, but because it's the right thing to do." He glanced at his unusual guest. "That's another human thing. We don't give up easily." Under the emerging stars, Lyra Vex's spots glowed with a color Ethan hadn't seen before, a gentle, shimmering silver that seemed almost hopeful. The first portal materialized without warning, a tear in reality that glimmered with impossible colors. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms stand up as the air charged with static electricity. The void stalker that emerged stood nearly 7 feet tall, its exoskeleton resembling polished obsidian. 4 arms ended in razor-sharp appendages, while its head featured a cluster of silvery orbs where eyes should be. "Stay behind me," Lyra Vex commanded, her voice in Ethan's mind now urgent and sharp. Her spots pulsed with rapid warning patterns as she positioned herself between Ethan and the intruder. The void stalker made a series of clicking sounds, its head tilting mechanically. Lyra Vex responded with similar clicks interspersed with low growls. Ethan didn't need a translation to recognize a hostile exchange. "What does it want?" he whispered. "To eliminate external influence," Lyra Vex replied mentally. "The Void Stalkers consider Earth part of their hunting territory. My presence violates their claim." The second and third portals opened simultaneously, one near the cabin's rear door and another beside the small shed where Ethan kept his equipment. They were surrounded. "Your speech patterns betray attachment to this human," the lead stalker suddenly said in perfect, emotionless English. "The Stellar Felide Alliance oversteps its boundaries. This world remains unclaimed." Ethan's mind raced. The creatures could understand English, which meant they had been monitoring Earth communications as well. "I was conducting authorized observation," Lyra Vex countered. "The cosmic accords permit scientific study." The stalker's appendages clicked together impatiently. "Observation without interference. Yet this human knows of your existence. The contamination must be corrected." Ethan realized with growing horror that correction likely meant his death. He glanced toward the storm cellar trapdoor hidden beneath the rug. He could slip away while Lyra Vex distracted them, but the thought vanished as quickly as it formed. "We have a saying on Earth," Ethan said, stepping forward despite Lyra Vex's attempt to keep him back. 3 against 2 isn't a fair fight." The stalker's head rotated toward him. "Fairness is irrelevant. Proper order must be maintained." Ethan edged toward his research equipment. "And we have another saying: never bring a knife to a gunfight." With deliberate movements, he picked up his ultrasonic mapping device. "You evolved in a different dimension with different physical laws, didn't you? I'm guessing your sensory system is attuned to entirely different frequencies than Earth creatures." The stalker took a step forward. "Your primitive technology cannot harm us." Maybe not. Ethan agreed, adjusting settings on the device. But science is about testing hypotheses. He glanced at Lyra Vex. Cover your ears, or whatever you use to hear. Before the stalkers could react, Ethan activated the modified device. A wave of ultrasonic pulses filled the cabin at a frequency he had calibrated based on the stalkers' communications. The effect was immediate. The creatures emitted high-pitched shrieks, their exoskeletons vibrating violently. "The rear exit now," Ethan shouted to Lyra Vex, grabbing his backpack of emergency supplies as they ran. Outside, the night had turned moonless, a blessing that hid their escape into the dense forest behind the cabin. Ethan led the way, using his knowledge of the terrain to navigate in the darkness. "Your actions were reckless," Lyra Vex admonished, keeping pace easily despite her recent injuries. "But effective. You hypothesized their dimensional origin created vulnerability to certain frequencies." Ethan managed a grim smile. "Like I said, we're adaptable. And we don't give up easily." Behind them, angry chittering sounds indicated the stalkers had recovered and begun pursuit. Dawn broke through the trees as Ethan and Lyra Vex reached the small cove where his colleague's boat was moored. They had traveled through the night, taking circuitous routes through the dense forest to evade the void stalkers. Ethan was exhausted, his muscles aching from the continuous movement, but adrenaline kept him alert. "The stalkers are persistent hunters," Lyra Vex warned as they approached the weathered fishing boat. "They will track us to the ocean." Ethan nodded grimly. "I'm counting on it. Water might give us an advantage." He quickly readied the boat, checking the diving equipment he'd arranged to borrow. His colleague believed Ethan was conducting an urgent survey of storm damage to the local reef system, not an entirely false explanation. "These breathing apparatus are designed for humans," Ethan said, examining the scuba gear. "Will you be able to function underwater?" Lyra Vex's spots pulsed with what Ethan had come to recognize as amusement. "My species evolved from semi-aquatic ancestors. I can remain submerged for approximately 40 of your minutes without assistance." "That should be enough time to reach your vessel," Ethan said, starting the boat's engine. As they pulled away from shore, he scanned the tree line. No sign of the stalkers, but he knew better than to hope they'd given up. Once they were several kilometers offshore, Ethan cut the engine and consulted the GPS coordinates Lyra Vex had provided. Her vessel had come to rest on a submerged shelf, fortunately within recreational diving limits. "The data cores are biometrically locked to my genetic pattern," Lyra Vex explained as Ethan prepared his diving gear. "But the vessel itself may have automated defenses against unauthorized access." "Will it recognize me as a threat?" Ethan asked, suddenly concerned. "Ordinarily, yes," she admitted. "However, I can modify your bioelectric signature temporarily." She placed one 6-fingered paw on Ethan's forehead, her spots glowing intensely. A tingling sensation spread across his skin. "The vessel will now register you as a non-threatening entity." Ethan was about to respond when a familiar shimmer appeared above the boat. A void stalker materialized, its obsidian exoskeleton gleaming in the morning sun. Without hesitation, Ethan activated the boat's emergency flare gun, firing directly at the creature. The intense light and heat caused the stalker to recoil momentarily, just long enough for Ethan to grab his underwater camera drone, modified overnight with the ultrasonic device. "I've reprogrammed this to emit continuous pulses at their vulnerable frequency," he explained quickly. "It should create a barrier they won't want to cross." He positioned the drone at the boat's center and activated it. The stalker immediately retreated to the edge of the vessel, trapped but unwilling to approach the sonic barrier. "We need to move now," Ethan urged, securing his oxygen tank. "The drone's battery will only last about 30 minutes. Lyra Vex nodded, her 3 eyes focusing on the water below. "The other stalkers will arrive soon. They hunt in coordinated patterns." Ethan took a deep breath, mentally reviewing their plan. Reach the vessel, extract the data cores, return to the surface before either the drone's battery failed or Lyra Vex's underwater endurance reached its limit. "Ready?" he asked, adjusting his mask. Lyra Vex's spots pulsed with determination. "Your adaptability continues to impress, Ethan Reeves. Perhaps your species has more potential than our model suggested." With that, they slipped into the cold Atlantic waters, leaving the trapped stalker hissing with frustration above. As they descended into the blue depths, Ethan spotted two dark shapes moving toward the boat from the direction of shore. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. The Alliance vessel hovered silently above the beach, its luminescent hull rippling like liquid silver in the morning light. The remaining Voidstalker stood motionless, its obsidian exoskeleton reflecting the ship's glow as it assessed this new development. Along the shoreline, Ethan and Lyra Vex remained partially submerged in the shallows, the precious data cores clutched in Ethan's trembling hands. Their underwater expedition had been successful but harrowing. Lyra Vex's vessel, a sleek, organic-looking craft roughly the size of a small yacht, had rested at an angle on the ocean shelf, its systems in low-power hibernation mode. Inside, bioluminescent panels had activated at Lyra Vex's presence, illuminating a control center unlike anything human technology had ever produced. The data cores resembled translucent crystals, pulsing with information in patterns that hurt Ethan's eyes when he tried to focus on them directly. Their return to the surface had been a desperate race against dwindling oxygen and the approaching stalkers. Ethan's modified drone had bought them just enough time, but their boat had been destroyed in the process, forcing them to swim the last kilometer to shore. Now, as the Alliance ship descended, a hatch opened on its underside. Three figures gracefully dropped to the sand, their movements fluid and precise. They resembled Lyra Vex in basic form, Felida with multiple limbs and iridescent spots, but each displayed distinct coloration and patterns. The central figure, larger than the others with silver-blue spots, stepped forward. "Commander Nyrakal," Lyra Vex greeted, her mental voice reaching Ethan even as she communicated with her own kind. The commander's gaze shifted between Lyra Vex and Ethan, three eyes narrowing slightly. "Observer Lyra Vex, your signal indicated distress and hostile interference." The Voidstalker suddenly emitted a series of rapid clicks. "The Alliance violates territorial agreements. This developing world falls under Void jurisdiction for future harvesting." Commander Nyrakal's spots flared with intense patterns. "Your claims were rejected by the Cosmic Council 3 stellar cycles ago. Earth remains neutral territory under observation protocols." Ethan stepped forward, water still dripping from his wetsuit. "With all due respect, Earth belongs to its own inhabitants. We're not anyone's territory or harvest." All eyes turned to him, the multiple eyes of the Alliance representatives, the silver orbs of the Voidstalker, and Lyra Vex's now familiar trinocular gaze. A tense silence followed. "The human speaks," the commander noted, surprise evident in her mental tone, "and carries secure data cores." Lyra Vex moved to Ethan's side. "Commander, I invoke observer's privilege. This human saved my life at risk to his own, assisted in recovering critical mission data, and demonstrated exceptional qualities that warrant special consideration." The commander's spots pulsed with what Ethan interpreted as skepticism. "One individual cannot redeem an entire species." "Not alone," Lyra Vex agreed, "but review my observational data. This human's actions are not statistical anomalies, but representative of emerging patterns I've documented across this region." She gestured to the data cores in Ethan's hands. "I request a full council review before classification is finalized." The Voidstalker took an aggressive step forward. "The contamination is extensive. This human must be neutralized for proper study to continue." Commander Nyrakal's spots shifted to a deep, authoritative purple. "Stand down, Stalker. Alliance protection protocols are now in effect." She turned to Ethan. "Human Ethan Reeves, transferring those data cores voluntarily would constitute a formal request for Alliance consideration." Ethan looked at Lyra Vex, who gave him a subtle nod. With steady hands, he held out the crystalline cores. "Consider this humanity's application," he said firmly. "We may not be perfect, but we deserve a chance to prove ourselves. The observatory platform extended from Ethan's rebuilt cabin like a ship's prow, offering an unobstructed view of the night sky. It had been exactly 1 month since the Alliance vessel departed with Lyra Vex and the data cores, leaving behind only subtle modifications to Ethan's equipment and a promise to return. He had spent every clear night since then watching the stars, wondering what deliberations were taking place among the distant cosmic authorities. By day, he continued his marine conservation work with renewed purpose. The knowledge that Earth was being evaluated had transformed his perspective, making each small environmental victory feel like part of something vastly more significant. He hadn't told anyone about his experiences, who would believe him? But the encounter had changed him in ways both subtle and profound. Ethan was adjusting his telescope when the air around the platform began to shimmer with familiar iridescence. His heart raced as the light coalesced into distinct forms. Lyra Vex at the center, flanked by 2 other Alliance representatives he hadn't seen before. Their spots pulsed in synchronized patterns that seemed almost ceremonial. Ethan Reeves, Lyra Vex greeted, her mental voice warm with what might have been affection. The Council has reached its decision. Ethan straightened, suddenly aware of how momentous this meeting was. Whatever happens, I want to thank you for advocating for us. I merely presented the data, she responded, her spots shimmering with modesty. Your actions spoke for themselves. The taller of the new arrivals stepped forward, spots glowing with formal patterns. I am Council Liaison Soraven. The Alliance has reviewed Observer Lyra Vex's complete record along with historical monitoring data. The alien's 3 eyes studied Ethan intently. Your species presents a unique case. Unique good or unique bad? Ethan asked, attempting to keep his tone light despite his anxiety. Both, the liaison answered candidly. Your capacity for destruction remains concerning, but your demonstrated potential for compassion, innovation, and growth has impressed several council members. The second new arrival moved forward, opening an ornate container that held what appeared to be a crystalline disk. Earth has been reclassified as a guardian potential world, a designation created specifically for your case. Ethan's brow furrowed. What does that mean exactly? Lyra Vex's spots pulsed with excitement. It means the Alliance recognizes that humanity's protective instincts, when properly directed, could someday make your species valuable guardians of cosmic biodiversity. The Void Stalkers have been formally barred from your system, the liaison added, and we have established an observation post near your Jupiter planet to monitor your development discreetly. The second alien presented the crystal disk to Ethan. This contains basic information about the Alliance and neighboring cosmic civilizations, knowledge typically reserved for species cleared for limited contact. Ethan accepted the disk with trembling hands. So we're not alone anymore. Full integration remains distant, the liaison cautioned. But yes, Earth has taken its first step toward wider cosmic citizenship. A small number of humans, individuals like yourself who demonstrate exceptional qualities, will be contacted as potential ambassadors. Lyra Vex moved closer to Ethan. I have been assigned as Earth's primary liaison for the next phase. Her spots pulsed with a warm golden hue. We have much work ahead, but I requested this assignment specifically. As the stars wheeled overhead, Ethan looked from the crystal in his hands to the alien visitors, overwhelmed by the implications. What had begun as a simple act of compassion, saving a drowning creature, had opened a door humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Well, he said finally, smiling at Lyra Vex, I guess I'd better make some coffee. It sounds like we have a lot to discuss.